What's up, guys? Barks is the first guy in the chat tonight. What's up, Barks? Sunday late stream. Let's go. Yeah, well, we got spring forward, and so it took the boys a little bit longer to go to sleep than normal, which I kind of figured was going to happen. But man, what a weekend! I mean, we got some SEC teams that are just getting. Florida narrowly escapes getting swept. I mean, it was very similar to the Virginia UNC series, except for Virginia's actually someone who should be able to beat UNC. Florida, again, High Point's a good program, especially in recent years. They've done a really good job, but nobody expected them to beat Florida, let alone have a chance of sweeping. And if it wasn't for High Point, walking, I think it was 5 guys in the 9th inning, High Point sweeps, which would have been just a crazy weekend for University of Florida, coming off of the high of beating Miami in 2 games because the third game got kind of weather canceled because of weather. And then LSU right now is down 6-1 in the top of the 9th to Sacramento State, who is 4-10 on the year. Okay. LSU offense. Let's look at what they've done so far today. LSU has 6 hits on the night against Sac State, 1 error. But man, if you look down this LSU lineup right now, it's not good, guys. You got 256, 259, 208, 273, 282, 182. You do have Milam's hitting 250. Jake Brown's hitting 408. Curiel's kind of picked it up of late. He's hitting 333 now, but not hitting for a lot of power. I see a lot of, and I get it. He was a really high-ranked high school player, one of the highest, if not the highest. But I don't understand the hype behind him. I think he's an okay defender. He's a good, he was a great hitter last year, albeit doesn't hit for a ton of power. And so in my mind, when I'm seeing predictions of him being one of the first college bats or, college outfielders off the board, I'm just like, man, you got Gracia at Virginia, you got Burris at Georgia Tech. I mean, you got a bunch of guys who I think should go ahead of him as of right now. Now he could turn it on, but again, if you're talking like college bats, I think there's a lot in the outfield, in particular as center fielders. I think he's down the depth chart for me. Kane's hurting right now. I mean, I would be too, Canes. I would be too. That's a tough series loss. There's no way to shake it. And Miami's bats are cooling off. I mean, that's what that's the. When we talk about early season success for any team, and you look at the schedule, and it's been a pretty easy one. Miami dominated offensively in that early schedule. But there's always the kind of come to Jesus meeting when you get to ACC play or you get to that weekend against Florida, which is, again, that's a top tier ACC team in Florida, even though they just got beat by High Point. They still are very good. And so there's going to be regression. The question is how much regression. Georgia Tech, for example, on the weekend, they take 2 out of 3. Disappointing loss on Sunday. Kind of bullpen just did not do great. Starting pitching did not do great. That is, again, has become really the concern for Georgia Tech, is just the starting pitching, not being able to go deep in games. Going 3 innings. The last 2 weekends. Tate McKee did pitch after a long weather delay or rain delay. And so you can't really make any judgment off how deep he went on Friday. But certainly the last 2 weeks, starting pitching has not gone very deep. Dylan Lloyd did pitch into the 5th on Saturday, but still, you need to have at least one guy that can get 6th inning. It would be great if it was in the 7th. So, that was a tough loss for Georgia Tech. But you win 2 out of 3. You're never gonna be upset winning 2 out of 3, because if you do that in every single series, you're gonna win a lot of games. You're gonna go 20-10 in the ACC. So But if I'm Miami, the concern is, okay, is our offense really not that good? Meaning they're still solid, but they're not the elite offense that we thought we were going to have coming into conference play. And so that's the question with every team is, like Georgia's a good example. What is Georgia going to look like when they get into conference play next week? Because they've played again, a kind of a Mickey Mouse pre-conference schedule, which is fine. A lot of teams do that. That's not calling Georgia out or anything like that. But the question is, okay, their offense has done really well. What's the regression going to look like? If you're Georgia Tech, I think you're really happy with how the offense looked this week. They scored, 36 runs in 3 games? That's going to win a lot of series. In Virginia Tech's arms, I'll say this. Virginia Tech's arms were very impressive. All 3 starters on the weekend are in the mid-90s. For the most part, throwing strikes. Friday night guy, freshman, was kind of scattered. He wasn't really throwing a lot of strikes. And Georgia Tech took advantage of that. But on Saturday, you faced Brett Renfro, who's one of the best pitchers in the ACC, and they did a great job against him. They did a great job against the starter today. They just couldn't really close late, and Virginia Tech just took advantage of some opportunities. I do think another concern for Georgia Tech is the defensive play, and it's not just the errors. You're seeing a lot of balls falling in the outfield that probably shouldn't fall, some misplays in the outfield. So it's not like something that's going to show up in the box score, but it's something that impacts the game. JD, hey, Kyle, good weekend of baseball. Great weekend of baseball. Great weekend of baseball. And LSU's now down to their final out. They do have a runner on second, but they're down by 5. So, it's going to take a few hitters to bring that tying run to the plate. LSU looking like they are going to drop the series to Sacramento State before conference play. So, again, expect LSU to fall. They're not going to fall 10 spots, but they're going to fall probably out of the top 5. Georgia Tech will probably move up 1. If they sweep, they're moving up higher. But Texas is going to move up, so that we are going to see some shakeup in the rankings. Miami's going to fall out. Tennessee's probably going to fall out. So Tennessee may fall out. We'll see. But Tennessee right now, I think I saw a tweet earlier that 3 of their starters went 0 for the weekend, which that's tough. When you have a couple guys do that, but 3 guys, that's crazy. Hang in there, Canes. They'll be there. Yeah, and you know what? Every team, for the most part, is going to go through a lull in the season. Whether it's your hope is that it's a weekend or 2. Sometimes it's longer than that. Think about NC State. In the last few years, NC State's kind of gained the reputation of they start slow and then they close hard. They close strong. And UNC started a little bit slow last year. They closed very good. So Miami, Canes is saying the hosting dreams are likely over. I don't agree. It's way too early to say that. But certainly they need to pick it up. They need to pick it up. And so we'll see. We'll see about Miami. But they were ranked preseason top 25 for a reason. And I think if you are a Miami fan, you just have to keep that in mind. You have to understand that these things happen. They're college baseball players. They're going to go through slumps. They're going to go through lulls. And the question is, how quickly can they respond and change course? And we saw Miami do that last year, right? With a way less talented team. They had good starting pitching, but offensively they were anemic last year. So their offense is definitely better this year, significantly better this year. So the question is, can they flush it? Nothing you can do about it. Can't dwell on it. The game's over. Series are over. We got to move on to the next. But it's looking like, and LSU does lose to Sacramento State. So that's a huge upset. A lot of SEC teams getting upset right now. And man, you just click on an LSU baseball tweet and I would not be reading those comments if I'm an LSU fan. So if we look at the top 25 today, you had Miami get upset by Boston College. Tennessee lost tonight against Wright State 6-0. They got shut out. And I have some people texting me about Tennessee in particular, asking about, what's going on with the offense. And I can't really speak to it. I have heard from multiple people that they believe that Josh Elander is no longer really doing the bulk of the hitting instruction and development. And so that is, again, it would be hard for me to believe that, but from what we've seen so far from them offensively, even with them being a less talented offense than they've been in the last few years, I would expect them to be doing better than they are right now. So Tennessee with that loss. East Carolina beat Coastal today. Tulane beat TCU today. TCU is now 9-6. Again, Florida narrowly escapes getting swept. I mean, High Point had to basically give it away. Walked 5 batters in the 9th. But that's a huge, talk about a salvage of a weekend for Florida. You get swept by High Point, your mental is in the dumpster. Arkansas loses to Stetson. That's right. Big H, what's up, Big H? I'm starting to think LSU isn't in a drought. I mean, it is concerning if you're LSU. Again, it's early, but their offense is just looking very inconsistent right now. By the way, amazing weekend for a Nole fan. 5-0. Watch Miami lose a series. Florida lose a series. Yeah, that's about as good as it gets for the Noles. Mods are just getting better, says JD. Javi Salas is jumping on CIS now to possibly give us some propaganda. What is on CIS? What is CIS, Canes? Tell him to get in here after. I'll have to mess it. I'll have to text Javi. High Rule. Tennessee, Georgia Tech, Miami, UTSA, Arkansas, North Carolina, LSU, and Coastal all had pretty bad losses this weekend. Which team do you think was exposed the most? My vote is Tennessee or Miami. I don't think North Carolina, because I think Virginia's actually really good. Not Georgia Tech. Again, in the ACC, like Virginia Tech, if you look at their record, you think, oh, this team's not very good. They have arms, man. They had a deep bullpen. A ton of dudes throwing mid-90s or higher for strikes with good off-speed. Their starters are all legit. Like, Virginia Tech's got a really good pitching staff. Really good pitching staff. It wouldn't surprise me if at the end of the year, again, you can't measure their staff off facing Georgia Tech because Georgia Tech's just an outlier offense. Virginia Tech's starting pitching was very impressive. Their bullpen was very impressive. Their offense is just okay. Like, that's their big question mark as a team. So I don't see the Virginia Tech loss on Sunday as a bad loss for Georgia Tech. Maybe it exposes right now. I think Georgia Tech, what has been exposed is, can the starting pitching be good enough? As far as, can they go deep enough in the games, or are you going to have to rely on a ton of bullpen arms? And you saw, basically late in the Georgia Tech game when it was tied, they had to bring in some guys that have really good stuff, but they're not great strike throwers, and that was a big issue. That was a big issue. That was where Virginia Tech took the 3-run lead and kind of never looked back. But I think, Coastal has been kind of exposed, but Coastal, again, is dealing with some pretty big injuries in their pitching staff. So you could see Coastal, depending on what the injuries are like, I'm not sure what they are, you could see them really rebound once those guys are back. But I think, in my mind, I think it's LSU is the biggest one. LSU and Florida. LSU and Florida had some pretty bad losses. So, in Tennessee, I think there's a good case for that as well. Their just offenses look not great. That's the reality. Surely the Noles move up this weekend. Oh, for sure. The Noles are going to move up 100%. Canes Insight. Oh, Canes Insight. Okay. 3 of TCU losses to UCLA. No, true. But still, 9-6 is not how you want to start the year. And you would like to have taken one of those games from UCLA at minimum. SEC is hurting with all these mid-major series losses. Yeah. The SEC right now is, has not looked like the SEC of the last decade for the most part. And again, it's early, but it's going to be interesting to see how that impacts RPI at the end of the year. When they do have a bunch of losses to not really even schools you wouldn't really classify as mid-major. Some of these schools they're losing to are pretty low-level D1s. So it is, if you're an SEC fan or a fan of an SEC team, but you're an SEC fan in general, there's been a lot of inconsistency. And so that's something to keep an eye on. Florida State's offense looked great tonight. 17 runs. They win 17-3. Georgia took care of business, 14-3 against Queens. Oklahoma narrowly beat Santa Clara 8-6. TCU in a doubleheader, they won the second game 4-3. So two really close games with Tulane. But Tulane's a solid program. Not like they're, that's a solid mid-major. But the LSU loss is huge. The LSU series loss to Sacramento State is wild. Notre Dame did take the series from Duke. Let's see here. Louisville beat Seton Hall 6-2 today. Pittsburgh beat San Jose State 3-2 to get the sweep. They're now 12-2. Pittsburgh's looking like kind of a sleeper in the ACC. We'll see how that plays out once they get into ACC play. Dare I say the ACC is better than the SEC this year? I mean, it's starting. I mean, listen, the SEC, no one I think who watches college baseball and is serious about it would say that over the last decade that they're the same. The SEC has been better. But you've seen over the last couple of years, the ACC starting to get really bridge that gap. And so far early on, the ACC has looked very good. Albeit with a few outliers like Louisville dropping out of the top 25 through the first 3 weeks. Texas let Upstate have a comeback going on in the ninth last night. Maybe I'm just being paranoid, but I'm a little concerned we couldn't close it out and let them score 6 runs. No, I mean, Hyrule, what you're looking for is a pattern, right? You're looking for, when you're looking at a red flag of a team, one game outliers are not something to be concerned about. What you're concerned about is when you see a pattern developing. And I'll give you a great example. When I was coaching at Georgia Tech in it had to be 21, the year after the COVID season that was canceled. We had a killer offense. Starting pitching was pretty good. We could not close out games. And we probably win the ACC that year if we just close out half of the games we should have. And so the concern that year was like, man, we can't depend on the back end of the bullpen. And the reason for that was it became a pattern. It wasn't just like, oh, we blew one game. So in any team, you're looking for a pattern that is consistently showing up. And, again, Georgia Tech this year, the example, I think the biggest red flag for a Georgia Tech team is the starting pitching and how deep they go into games. Because inevitably, if you're going 3-4 innings as a starter, your bullpen's having to cover a ton of innings. And if you have to do that every game, you're going to have to pitch guys on Sunday in situations that you would not normally pitch them in. And so again, today against Virginia Tech, you had to bring in Bursama in the 6th or 7th inning, whichever one it was, and a couple batters reach, and then you bring in Shattuck, who command has looked better, but he's still a guy that's going to walk guys. And he was, you could tell he knew he was in a one tie game with a couple runners on and fell behind pretty much every hitter. And when you do that, and those are two guys you'll feel good about with a 3-run lead. But with a tie game or a 1-run lead or even a 2-run lead, you're kind of like, man, you'd like to go somewhere else for some stability. I do think, talking about it today, I think a good idea would have Shattuck as an opener on Sundays if he doesn't pitch Friday or Saturday. And I do think the bullpen is deep enough to facilitate that. And if you have Shattuck open up on Sunday, because right now the other thing I see is that Dylan Loy and Cooper Underwood, Saturday starter and Sunday starter for Georgia Tech, are the exact same pitcher. They're kind of that stock left-handed pitcher who's high 80s, throws strikes with 3 pitches, and can mix it up. But you're seeing that back-to-back as an opposing team. And so that on Underwood on Sunday, it's not gonna be as effective because Loy's pitching in front of him. So if you have an opener like Shattuck who's throwing mid to high 90s, real stuff guy, and he can get through 2-3 innings, then you bring in Underwood and he can cover 3, maybe 4 innings. Now you're set up. And when the comparison between Shattuck, who's a righty flamethrower, versus Underwood, who's a lefty kind of crafty guy right now as a freshman, those two things are 2 different looks. So now hitters are going to be offset, and the pitchability of Underwood's going to play up after having to face a guy like Shattuck early on. So, I mean, it'll be interesting to see what Georgia Tech plan is. They are hurting. Mason Patel is out with an injury right now. I don't know what it is, but if he can return semi-close to what his form was out of the bullpen last year for Georgia Tech, all of a sudden they're way deeper in the bullpen, because if he can cover 3 or 4 innings like he did all year last year, now your bullpen that has added depth this year is a lot better, significantly better. When there's 4 innings, you don't need to cover in the inning out of the or in the series that you don't need to cover out of the bullpen. Big H, it'll be an absolute joke if Tennessee or TCU are still above FSU, even though they won their series. On 3 prediction has us staying at 20. I don't see that happening. I think Florida State's going to move up. Like on 3, whatever. They're not the ranking, official rankings people of college baseball. That's D1 baseball, and I think D1 baseball is going to move up Florida State. Again, it's a series win over. Or a sweep over Northern Kentucky. So, like, should you move up a ton? No, but I think they will move up a spot or 2, couple spots. I would say maybe move up 8 to 18 or something like that. I think that Florida getting exposed may have exposed Miami a little bit. Perhaps that top 25 matchup wasn't necessarily a top 25 matchup. No, I think Florida is legit. Their arms are just too legit. Florida's going to be fine. Miami, the question for Miami is their offense going to be good enough? Because their offense was so elite before facing Florida and Boston College. The question is this just a lull where, their offense cooled off a little bit? And will they return to maybe not that elite form, but closer to that elite form? So we don't know yet. We just have to wait and find out. So I don't think either of those teams have been exposed yet, but Miami certainly next weekend's big. Like you need to see something turn around for Miami, especially offensively. Who would you think is 3rd best team in the West? UCLA, USC. Oof. UCLA, USC. That's a good question, man. I think on paper, you could go Arizona State. Possibly. It's just hard to tell with those West Coast teams, man, because, we talked about this a lot last year, but the West Coast in general, again, used to be like those teams over there were like the best teams in college baseball. And now it's just not the case. Look at what Stanford's done the last year and this year. Oregon State looks like pretty good. Maybe you could say Oregon State, but they've kind of been up and down. Maybe you could go Oregon, but they're certainly not. Yeah, Oregon's been pretty consistent, high roll. Like, I don't think they don't have the talent that they've had in the last couple years, but they're consistent. So I think you could go with like ASU or Oregon or Oregon State, any of those teams. But the West Coast in general is just not nearly as competitive as it used to be. You think about like the Cal State Fullertons and, Fresno States. And there used to be a ton of really good mid-majors on the West Coast. And there still are a decent amount, like Santa Barbara, Cal Poly, Irvine. But it's not as deep as it used to be. So sometimes it's hard early on to see that. And you got to wait till they get into conference play and to see how it plays out. USC's the only undefeated team. Yeah, USC, dude, again, they're not giving up runs. They just shut down offenses. Fun stat heard on the LSU game tonight. The last time since 2007 that LSU had 5 losses before SEC play, they didn't even make the SEC tournament. Yeah, I mean, I don't foresee them not making the tournament because now, like, again, the thing, I hate this about the tournaments, but now everybody gets in basically. So it would be very hard, making the tournament in 2007, or even when I played, that was an accomplishment to make it to the tournament. Now, like, you could be one of the worst teams in the conference and win the conference championship, which makes 0 sense in my mind. Oh, you misread the question? Could be San Diego State. Yeah, San Diego State's been good. LSU commentators were an absolute joke. They coped with their loss by saying Tennessee lost 2 or 3 to Vanderbilt, lost 2 or 3 to Florida, lost 2 or 3 to Arkansas, lost 2 or 3 when only one of those teams really did. Yeah, I mean, if I'm an LSU fan, like, you're trying to find a silver lining here because a series loss to Sacramento State is very concerning. San Diego State, just no depth on the bump. Yeah. Not to mention saying their catcher had great accuracy after drilling a kid in the head running to first. Yeah, that's a weird thing to say, right? That's a weird thing to say on the broadcast. Well, let's look ahead to next week now, guys. I think so. Thursday night, we get Georgia Tech versus Clemson, ACC Network prime time. So the week will start early. Obviously, we got midweeks coming up, but Georgia Tech Clemson on Thursday is going to be great. Let's see what the midweek matchups look like. See if we got any good ones. Coastal and Wake in the midweek on Tuesday. That'll be a good matchup. Good test for Wake. I mean, even though Coastal has not played great so far, that'll be a good test. West Virginia, Miami should be good. Florida State and Florida in the midweek. That'll be a big one for Big H. Florida State versus Florida. See if Florida can kind of bounce back. Or can we see Florida State continue the offensive surge? We got Ole Miss, Southern Miss. That'll be a good game. Ole Miss is not in the top 25, even though they're 15-2. Southern Miss is number 10. TCU, Kansas should be pretty decent. And then UCLA faces Irvine, which could be a solid game, even though Irvine's only 9-7 right now. So we got some decent midweek games, but then if we move on to the rest of the weekend, let's see. Texas is playing maybe re-ranked Ole Miss this weekend. Yeah, I think so. I mean, if you look at Ole Miss, they got beat by UTSA, and they got beat by Texas, and both are top 25 teams. So maybe Ole Miss does jump back into the rankings. But certainly the biggest matchups next weekend are Georgia Tech, Clemson, Florida State, Wake, Tennessee, Georgia. That's going to be a good one because can Tennessee wake up, and is Georgia as legit offensively as they've shown so far? Miami and Duke. That's a big one for Miami. Like, that's got to be a series win for Miami. You cannot, like we talked about this last night, Miami has a very nice pretty much first half of their ACC play as far as schedule goes, as far as strength of the schedule. They got a tough back end of the schedule. So Miami needs to get out to a good start early on. And so they need to win this series in Durham. Then you got Arkansas, Mississippi State, which that'll be a fantastic series. Texas, Ole Miss. LSU, Vanderbilt. Can Vanderbilt kind of right the ship? Vandy's kind of not playing very consistent right now. Oklahoma, Texas A&M. So we got some big matchups coming up. Javi Salas is pushing propaganda. Do not Do not say that about Javi, okay? Javi is not pushing propaganda. Javi is just, again, he knows, like I know, that it's early and teams go through these little lumps and bruises and lulls and slumps. So Javi knows you cannot panic yet. Now, next weekend, if you lose to Duke, you're going to be more in that panicky mode. But it's funny because we talk about stuff like that all the time. And, oh, man, teams got a really, really tough back half, or they got a really tough start to ACC play. And then they blow it out against the best teams. So you never know. And you can't panic this early in the season with how great Miami looked early. Getting in contact with High Point coach now to give the team tips. Yeah, that's a good idea. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Link Jarrett's calling him up. Saying Duke is tough. We need to smoke Duke. They should have no chance against us. I will say this. Do not underestimate Duke, and do not underestimate Corey Muscara, like making that team more competitive than people think it's going to be. But certainly, Duke needs to be a series win. It doesn't need to be a sweep, but it needs to be a series win if you're Miami. It just has to. Because you're going to feel really bad about yourselves if you go 3 weekends straight losing series. That's when a team's morale really starts to break down. 2 is still, you don't want to go 2 straight weekends losing, but that happens to a lot of teams. But if you go to 3, then not only is the fan base thinking the team's not good, the team themselves are thinking, are we not good? So Duke series needs to be a win. Wake Forest and FSU both play a top 25 matchup Tuesday before going head-to-head. Yep. So a good warm-up for both teams heading into a tough series on the weekend. Honestly, High Point played really deep throughout the series, and it helped them out big time. Yeah. And you're seeing a lot of teams do that, which I don't like that personally. I think, again, you have some outfielders who maybe aren't the best. Maybe you play them deeper. But it's very easy to come in on the ball. And so if you're not training your outfielders day by day to go back on the ball, which can easily be done, you just play shallow and BP, and so more balls going to be hit over your head. You practice going back on the ball. That's what I did every day. I played shallow in the game. It was a different era. Ball went nowhere, but I played super shallow. And if you have an outfielder that can play shallow and still take away balls deep, that's gonna be a lot less hits for an opposing team. And what I see now is like everybody's playing so deep, even with the runner on second, which I don't understand because with the runner on second, you want to be able to throw a guy out at home, and these guys are playing so deep they have no chance of throwing a guy out. So it's like everybody's just playing to like take away doubles and stuff, which I get in this era, but still I don't think you need to play on the warning track. Like legitimately on Saturday, Virginia Tech, one of Georgia Tech's hitters, I think it might have been Will Baker, hit like kind of a routine fly ball on the left, like shallow routine fly ball. He was literally playing on the track. When the camera panned to him, his heel was touching the dirt. Like he was that close to the track. And in my mind, that's like, okay, what are we doing here? Because that even makes it harder to rob a home run because you don't have enough space to really time it. So I don't, when I saw that, I was like, what are we doing? But I will say we lost 5 series in a row to start ACC play last year. Yeah. Things can change in a heartbeat in college baseball. And team can look really good and then not look good and then look really good again. Miami finished super strong last year. Now, Miami's schedule is about basically the opposite. Last year, they had a very tough schedule early, and then they dominated the back half. But, it's again, we've seen a bunch of teams like NC State last couple years has started out really slow in ACC play and then closed really strong. Remember, UNC opening weekend last year at home got swept by Stanford, and Stanford was not good last year. So losing to Virginia 2 out of 3 just open up ACC play at home. It's not what you wanted if you're a UNC fan, but their pitching staff is incredibly deep. They're going to be totally fine. I think there's a good chance the FIU job will come open this year. Oh, you got some inside. You got some dope for us, Canes? Texas always looks good. Yeah, and you know what? That's kind of an aspect of Jim Schlossnagle, man. Like, his teams just play really, really clean baseball. And in college baseball, you don't even need to have, like, think of Texas last year. Like, no one expected them to win the ACC or SEC regular season title. And they did. And it wasn't because they were just like this extremely talented team, even though they had talent, you know. But they just play clean baseball. They don't walk guys. They don't make errors. They don't make mistakes on the base paths. Like, they play clean baseball. And in college baseball, that's a huge that creates a huge delta in the formula for winning a game, because the errors and the walks, the free 90s in college baseball just kill you. They kill you. And so when you don't give opposing teams free 90s and you don't take away 90s on your own side, like on the bases, for example, then all of a sudden you beat a lot of teams that maybe people thought you shouldn't beat. Like, for example, today, Georgia Tech, and something I'm seeing pretty consistently is the outfield play in the corners is not great. Ball got hit down the line today. We don't play it off the wall correctly and it gets by us. And then another run scores because of that. So those little things that don't show up in the box score, that doesn't show up as an error. But if you just field that cleanly off the bounce, off the fence or the wall, and get it in, maybe that's a difference in a run. Now, if you make a couple of those mistakes during the game, that's a couple runs. Georgia Tech lost by 3. The shifts as well for Georgia Tech today did not help them. They actually had one ground ball into the shift where the guy beat it out because they're playing so deep. Second baseman's playing so deep. And then a couple shifts, a couple balls that would have been routine outs that are base hits because of the shift. So I understand shifting as long as your pitch, like, this is just generally speaking about any team that shifts. If you're going to shift a guy pull in the infield, you have to pitch that shift. If you're pitching or you're shifting to a pull side guy, so you're shifting him pull side and he's a lefty, you need to throw him fastballs in. You need to throw him a lot of breaking stuff, like soft stuff he can get around. You can't throw him fastballs away where he's late and hits a ground ball to the shortstop, but the shortstop's not there. That happened today. So, and again, sometimes you call a pitch in and the guy can't execute. A lot of guys in college baseball cannot execute a fastball in. It's maybe one of the toughest pitches to command. Usually you can command that pretty consistently. You're moving on to the next level. So those things add up over a game, and they don't show up in the box score. If you didn't watch the game, you wouldn't understand. They just look so bad. It's already year 4. They just got swept by FAU for the second straight year. Yeah. Excuse me. Everyone talks about the losing team in the upset, but I got to give credit to High Point and whoever beat LSU, Sacramento State. They played their tails off. Yeah, 100%. But at the same time, if teams are, let's say LSU and Florida's talent is here, and High Point and Sacramento State's talent is here, even if High Point and Sacramento State play above their talent or their expected runs scored and runs given up, and let's say they play a little bit above, that still means LSU and Florida are playing well below what's expected of them. So the reason people focus on the team that loses in an upset, and like in particular, I think the Sacramento State upset of LSU is a worse one than High Point of Florida, because High Point's been a really solid mid-major program the last couple years. But the reason the focus is on that team like Florida and LSU is because they're playing well below what's expected of them, whereas Sacramento State and High Point may be playing a little bit above what's expected of them, but LSU's Florida are up here, so they're playing way below it. Recruiting question to you. Will Coupe, younger brother, who I saw was ranked top 50 by Perfect Game in 2028, decide between Miami and Georgia Tech? And will we have a legit chance for his services? Well, his brother is Gabriel is my client. So, and for certain you will have a chance at him. Something to think about is, listen, like whenever brothers are involved, a lot of times what happens is if the older brother is not playing a lot at the school he's at, it's harder to get that guy to commit to that school. And it's just because it's a familial, no matter, like, listen, Nathaniel Coupe has done a great job at Georgia Tech in the limited at bats he's gotten, but he's got the guys ahead of him are, Von Lackey, who's probably going to be a top 10 pick, and Drew Rogers, who's been, quite frankly, he's looked even better defensively than Lackey as far as throwdowns to second. He's thrown out a ton of guys already, and he's hitting bombs, and he's hitting for high average. So, like, Nathaniel Coupe is a great example of a guy who, at a lot of other schools, may be starting, whether as catcher or DH or first base. So that's something to think about. I saw Jonathan follow him recently. I've been following him since you told me you were his client, or he was your client last year. Yeah. And he's good, man. He's really good. High Point had a guy get 3 push bunts for a hit this weekend. Yeah, it sounds like Kyle Wren. And you know what, JD? Like, if guys that could run would develop that skill in college baseball, they would make out like bandits. Because, back when I was playing, that was more common. Certainly no one did it as much as I did. I was probably the best base hit bunter in the country. Like, that's not bragging. That's just the reality. I was elite with that skill. Like, head and shoulders above everybody. And anybody who played with me, coached me, saw me play would say that. Anybody. I was comped. One of the comps I got in the draft was Brett Butler, who was maybe the best base hit bunter in Major League Baseball history. So that was how good I was at that skill. And that's because my dad knew I was an elite runner. And he's like, you need to know how to do this. And I did that through high school. I mean, in college, I'm not kidding. You can ask anybody that played with me or played against me. The third baseman would play like 15 or 20 feet in on the grass. And I could still do it and get it down because I just had the skill to deaden it right on the line off the end of the bat. But I remember a series against Duke my junior year. I was not swinging it great at the time. And I walked out of that series with like 5 or 6 hits, and 3 or 4 of them were base hit bunts. One game in particular, I had 2 hits. They were both base hit bunts to third, because bunting on turf is like easy mode. Turf is interesting because if you hit a hard ground ball, it skips and picks. It doesn't die like it does on grass. But on turf, if you bunt the ball and you deaden it, it just dies and it stays true. It's not going to fade, foul, or anything like that. So anytime I played on turf, it was trying to bunt. Miami's bullpen can't command a damn thing. Yeah, I mean, listen, Miami's got some, they got some things to fix, but it's too early to panic yet. Like I said, next weekend, if things don't look great, then you can start thinking, man, this ain't good. Nathaniel was my client. Gabriel is now my client as well. Florida absolutely played below. The Airs looked like Little League. Yeah, exactly. So that's why the focus is always on the team, the highly ranked team that gets upset, particularly in a series. In the midweeks, that's going to happen pretty much to everybody. But in a weekend series, like 2 out of 3, the way more talented team should win 2 out of 3. I got to go. Y'all have fun. All right. See you, Hyrule. I saw he was at GT and he's a reliable depth piece for them. Yeah. He's been great off the bench. Great off the bench. He got, I'm trying to remember, Alex Hernandez came out of one game last weekend with like what seemed like he must have just tweaked something and they were really protecting. They took him out of the game, but it definitely didn't look like he pulled a hamstring, because that's usually pretty obvious to tell because they're in pain and they really are, they grab back at their hamstring almost right away. But he definitely tweaked it, and I think they were just like, we're up big already, or not. It wasn't huge, but they were up decent amount. Like, let's get him out. He came in, first pitch he sees with bases loaded, grand slam. So he's done a great job with the at bats he's gotten there. How hard is it for a Power 4 team to not make the tournament? I mean, it feels like we make it every year. It's hard not to make it if you're in the SEC or the ACC. The Big 12 and the Big 10, it's different because they just don't have the depth that those conferences have. When you look at, for example, when you look at the top 25 right now, so the SEC has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. SEC has 11 teams in the top 25. So in a conference that's that difficult, when you're facing ranked competition almost every weekend, you can go 14 and 16 in conference play, and you're in the tournament. We saw LSU in Florida in the last couple of years go 13 and 17 and get into the tournament. That's how difficult that conference is. The ACC has, and is going to have more after this week, but as of this past week, the ACC has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, probably going to have 8 after this week. Virginia probably going to go in. But anyway, when you're, again, very similar depth-wise, you're going to have, you can go 14 and 16 in the ACC, and you're probably in the tournament, as long as you take care of business in the midweek and your non-conference play. So in those two conferences, it's very difficult to have a lot of wins in conference. So you're going to get in a majority of the time. Outside of those two, like in college baseball, you really have the Power 2, which is the SEC and the ACC. And then you have the Big 12 and the Big 10 that are kind of a step below those two, and then the mid-majors. So for Power 4, it's really not fair to lump in all 4 conferences. You really have to look at the ACC and the SEC as kind of the outliers of it's not easy by any means, but you just have a lot more room for failure in those conferences and still be able to make it in. We both literally didn't make the tournament this decade, Big H. We both had the 2 longest streaks with like almost 50 straight years making the tournament. And we both for sure have one of the longest making it to Omaha streaks in a row. Yeah. Well, yes, but that's 2 out of 130 seasons. That's why I was asking. Yeah. In Florida, I mean, think about Florida State. I talked about it last night, but like Mike Martin, senior, with 40 straight years of 40-win seasons, that's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. Without NIL, without any of that stuff, just an unbelievable coach. And, I like what 11 did. I talked to James Ramsey about it a bunch because him and Danny Hall, as far as how they ran an offense, were very different. So Mike Martin would, if you were a freshman in the lineup, he was going to control your at bat, meaning 1-0, he's going to give you a take sign. 2-1, he might give you a take sign. 3-2, he might give you a take sign. If you're a freshman, you haven't proven that he can trust you to make the correct decisions. He's going to give you take signs thinking, you know what, I think this guy's going to throw a ball here. Take. I don't want him chasing and not getting a walk. And if you looked at Florida State's lineup almost every year, the bottom 3 hitters, like 7 through 9, always hit like 240 or 250, but they had like 400 plus on base percentages. Now, DH was not like that. DH was like, he was going to let you do what you do, be you. And that's why Georgia Tech always recruited great hitters. Georgia Tech's real reputation in college baseball is they always bang. They always hit for power. They always score a ton of runs. Florida State was more of like, they just have a very, very good all-around team, albeit obviously they always had good offenses. But if you looked at like their lineup, you'd be like, man, the bottom 3 guys aren't that great. But that was because he's controlling that at bat. What's up, Wiley Ballard Enjoyer? let's see. It takes losing midweeks. That's really how you don't make it. Yes, 100%. But I will say majority of both of our games were at home, and we played like almost 70 games at one point. The old timers were telling me every week was 6 games. Yeah, they used to play a ton of games. I'm happy I finally know who the real Wiley Ballard is now. The real Wiley Ballard enjoyer. Would you call Mike Martin the best coach of all time outside of the fact of winning it all? A very big factor, admittedly. Yeah. I mean, I think that's like, the one thing that really is kind of like the one thing he never achieved. But certainly that 40 straight years of 40-win seasons will never be replicated. Not once. Kane's the best coach all time is Ron Frazier. You could say Mike Martin is the best coaching tree of all time. Yeah, I mean, certainly you can make the argument for Ron. I'm just saying the 40 wins in 40 straight years is like, it's unbelievable. And if not, who is? I would say Mike Martin. I understand Ron Frazier. I understand stuff like, I have to understand coaches like that for sure, though. What's up? What's up, Wiley? Wiley Ballard enjoyer. I think Augie Garrido might have something to say about that. Sure. Augie Garrido Augie Garrido certainly is like his success in winning national championships at multiple schools and multiple national championships are big time. Mike Martin has a coaching tree of 2 of the Mount Rushmore coaches, Ron Frazier and Skip Bertman. Yep. Skip Bertman. That's another one. Think about another great coaching tree is Jack Leggett. At one point, Jack Leggett's assistant coaches were Kevin O'Sullivan, Tim Corbin, and Eric Bakich. So 2 national championship winners and Eric Bakich, who's still young, and we could see something like that happening at Clemson under Bakich. He almost did it at Michigan. So Jack Leggett's got a great coaching tree too. Canes, is BC now by default the best pitching staff in the ACC after taking down the all-world Miami team? I am not Wiley Ballard. Thank you for the distinction. Only an enjoyer. True. Or maybe my eyes aren't working properly, Wiley. Yeah, it could be. It could be both. I think Miami's going to be fine, but they just got to right the ship next weekend. Bakich is an agent of Hezbollah? I don't think so. My favorite Omaha was 4 SEC, 4 ACC 2 years ago. 1 check swing away on that phenomenal Tennessee team. Yeah. I mean, that was. I feel for Florida State on that check swing because I thought I thought it was for sure a check, for sure a strike. And listen, I love that staff at Tennessee. I love Josh Elander. I love Luke Bonfield. And Quentin Eberhardt, who's their strength coach. He was. It's hilarious because people ask me about. I played with Elander for basically 2 seasons in the Atlanta Braves minor league system. And Quentin Eberhardt, and I played with Luke Bonfield in Indy ball my last year of playing. And he was kind of a young guy on the team. And Quentin Eberhardt was me and Josh Elander's strength coach in the Atlanta Braves system in the minor leagues. So it's funny, when I did a couple games of broadcast in the regional at Tennessee 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, whatever it was. And I basically, I knew I had played with most of their staff, which was funny. Donde está Dusty? I don't know, man. I don't know. I texted him. 332 comments underneath the LSU baseball final game tweet. Oh my gosh, man. Just crazy. You know what? That's part of it though, man. Who's the best player to ever come out of the modern era of college baseball, 1990 present? Might be Buster Posey. He's certainly up there in that conversation as far as, winning 3 World Series, perennial all-star. Quite possibly, kind of they've certainly was like on track to be a Hall of Famer. I don't know if that will happen with kind of him, I would say, retiring earlier than expected. Skeens is up there, Strasburg. But Skeens, he's still got, listen, he could get, and I don't wish this, but like, the thing about baseball that makes the Hall of Fame so special is it's not just about how talented you are and how well you perform, but it's how well you perform over a very long career. And that seems to be changing, though. It seems like the Hall of Fame is kind of, I think people are realizing no one's going to get to 300 wins anymore. No one's going to get to 3,000 hits anymore for the most part. So they have to adjust the Hall of Fame. And I don't really like that. Pat Burrell, good point, Canes. Ryan Braun, even though with the steroid stuff, there's a lot of really good players you could bring up. Ryan Braun's a great Miami Hurricane. Mark Teixeira, Nomar Garciaparra, Jason Varitek. You're being censored again, Wiley Ballard and Joyer? I don't know. Did you get censored? I didn't see it. I have this bobblehead in my room. That's how legendary he was. Pat Burrell? Yeah. But 300 of those tweets are other teams' fans in LSU. What are they going to say? They have 2 rings in 3 years. Yeah. Yeah, it is a bunch of other teams' fans like putting those like pictures with like Eric Backett just watched this whole game or something like that. Pat the Bat batted 505 and had like 20 home runs his freshman year. Yeah, I mean, insane. He was insane. FMK, I don't even know what that means. Ivanka, Young Hillary, Young Nancy, Reagan. Okay. Oh, okay. F, Mary, kill. I'm not gonna. That's a K for Young Hillary. That's a probably M for Ivanka. Probably F for Young Nancy Reagan, I guess. I don't know. Steroids in Miami, what? Yeah. Who knows? Ryan Braun is the highest integrity Miami baseball alum. I will say this about Ryan Braun. Like, obviously, I was in big league camp with the Brewers for a couple years. And so as an outfielder, I was around him all the time in those spring trainings. And he was awesome. Great guy. Now, I don't know what he was like before the whole steroid controversy, so I can't speak to that. But my interactions with him were always great. Aubrey Huff, yeah. Bucky, I tell the old timers all the time, Miami hasn't been good since we joined a conference and stopped hiring our own umps. We got caught for steroids and we stopped stealing signs. We haven't been good since we cheated. That's why I want to get back to our old ways. Just cheat again. It worked well for Michigan. Yeah, some of you guys are new to the stream this year, but I told Canes, I'm not kidding. Like when we would take trips to Miami, Like, it was a known fact that our signs had to get changed up every inning. We had to have eyes on the parking deck and right center because they had been known to have a guy up there with like binoculars and a, walkie-talkie. So like that was a legit thing. And then, James Ramsey told me the story of them playing Miami when he was at FSU, and they're calling the pitches. I think it was actually when he was the volunteer that year before he came to Georgia Tech. And he said, they're calling pitches on the walkie-talkie, and they said like change up, and then they heard over from the walkie-talkie, change up. And then they kind of let it happen a few more times, and they realized that Miami had their, frequency or their whatever on the walkie-talkie, and we're hearing all the pitch calls. So like, and Mike Martin, I guess, went out there and really just gotten a big tussle. Oh my God, I forgot to tell you, the space last night was an all-timer. One of our pitching commits coaches comes on the space and starts going off on JD and our pitching coaches for how bad our staff is and saying he hasn't developed anyone in 20 years. And I go, binoculars, hilarious. No, dude, I'm dead serious. Like, that was our strength coach, because our strength coach, before he came to Georgia Tech, was at FSU. He's been at Georgia Tech for like 30 years now. But he did say, like, he was like, guys, we got to be, I'm telling you, it was a thing. We didn't do that with any other team. It was like, all right, we got to have our signs. We got to have different signs that we can adjust to if we feel like anything fishy's going on. We got to make sure we got eyes up in the parking deck and right center. I'm not kidding, dude. It wasn't like a secret thing. Like, all the players knew that. And that was also 2011 was the year that Frankie Ratliff, who in 2010 was a freshman All-American, had a great year. They had a ton of dudes have massive years. He got busted in the fall of 2011 selling weed on campus to an undercover cop. And they searched his dorm room or apartment. I don't know if he was on campus or not. They searched it and they found like 12 vials of HGH. And so from that point on, I don't know if it's still happening, but Miami was the only team in college baseball that was getting tested for HGH and steroids. So there's a reason Canes is bringing that up, because and you can find that article still online about Frankie Ratliff. So there's a reason that, teams knew that about Miami. Bro, you have a top 150 player in the nation as your pitcher, and he's committed to Miami. If what you just said is true and you believe that, why is he committed to Miami? Yeah, that's a bad look too. Like, that's just a bad look. If you're a travel ball coach or a high school coach, like, you don't want to sour relationships with a program that's in your backyard. It's just not how you operate. So that's not good. He goes because I love Miami so much. And I go, how does that make any sense? Aren't you supposed to help the kid? If you believe what you're saying, why he is committed here, he went quiet. And it's also not true. Miami's coaching staff is full of guys with a ton of experience. So like, that's just a guy who doesn't know what he's talking about, because he's upset with how Miami's performed the last 2 weeks. The commit is Isaac Vidal, the best player in Dade County. He throws 91, 93 right-hand pitcher. He's a beast. Okay. Quick way to ruin your life. Yes. And his life was ruined for sure. Look up the Miami New Times, Miami Hurricanes baseball steroids. Yeah, you can find the article, man. And coincidentally, in 2011, they had a number of guys in their lineup. Now the bats changed. So the home run numbers were going to go down. But they had guys, one guy in particular, Harold Martinez, who I know Canes knows, and he's a good guy. But he went from like 20 home runs as a sophomore to 1 home run as a junior, I think, or like 2 or 3, which was like that. Okay. That's weird. So, you can kind of draw your own conclusions from that little piece of data. Look up he's one of Poman's right-hand man as well. All right, I got to head out for the night. Y'all have a good one. Yeah, I'm about to head out too. But yeah, there's a reason why Miami has that reputation. It's not, it's not just because people are haters. I wouldn't even bring it up if I thought that was the case. Canes, quit worrying about Miami middle schoolers. Got to win an ACC series. True. But you got to stay on the recruiting grind too, though. And if you take care of a business on the field, recruiting becomes easier. Late to the party. Any concerns about Georgia Tech relief pitching? No, Nancy. I'm not concerned about Georgia Tech's relief pitching as much as I would say the cardinal concern, if you're a Georgia Tech fan, is the starting pitching's ability to go deep in games. Because what that's going to do is you're going to, like on a Sunday, like what happened today, you had to bring in Bursama and Shattuck into a tie game, and those are both guys that are going to walk people. And so when you have to use a ton of bullpen arms the first two games, or you have to throw guys a couple innings, 3 innings, and now they're down, you're going to have to pitch a guy in a situation that you wouldn't necessarily want to pitch them in. And that's what happened today. So I think the bullpen actually has been really, really good for the most part. Like they're not walking guys, they're striking guys out. You're seeing the average velocity in the bullpen continue to rise. Like we have a lot of guys that are kind of 92 to 94, which is great. But I think you just ran into Virginia Tech also had very good pitching. Virginia Tech's pitching was actually very good. By far the best pitching Georgia Tech's faced. They say us Hispanics have a bit of petty in us. If I needed to disappear someone, would Canes be my guy to call? 100%, bro. The Canes would be my first call. Pie Gal, what's your schedule this week for the stream? I think I'll probably do one Thursday. Kind of maybe an hour into the Georgia Tech game. Maybe Tuesday as well. We'll see. But I'll definitely do a couple on the weekend. So I'm definitely going to do at least 2 or 3 streams on the weekend going forward. And then maybe one during the midweek. So we'll just see. It'll be something like that. Underwood going to Sunday starter. Continue to be Sunday starter. I think he's going to, because I don't see where you go, where you move to from him. I think a really good recipe could be having Shattuck start Sunday as an opener, so he doesn't go more than one time through the order, whether that's 2 innings or 3 innings. And then you bring in Underwood, and hopefully by then you've given Underwood a little bit of a cushion and he can go 3 or 4 innings, and now you're set up for the rest of the game. Because one problem I see is that Dylan Loy and Cooper Underwood are the exact same pitcher. High 80s lefty, good command, throw strikes with all their pitches. But when you face Loy on Saturday and then you face Underwood on Sunday, Underwood is not going to be as effective because, okay, we saw that guy yesterday. We kind of know what he does. We know what his stuff kind of looks like. It's a little bit different, but it's the same look. When I talk about a look, it's like an over the top right-handed pitcher with a fastball, slider, changeup. Which is the other thing about Georgia Tech's bullpen. There's not a lot of different looks. It's pretty much all, the lefties, you got some different looks. You got McElvey, who's kind of over the top four-seam guy. You got Caden Campbell, who's kind of a low three-quarters guy, slinger. But you don't have that as much with the right-handed pitchers in the bullpen. But the right-handed pitchers the bullpen has been really solid. It's just if your starters cannot get through 3 innings or through 4 innings, you have to use your bullpen, and you don't have Mason Patel to kind of piggyback off one of those guys. Now your bullpen is going to get stretched, even though it is deeper this year. Loved seeing the fire from GT lefty reliever, told those Hokies to sit down. Yeah, I mean, doing that down 3 late, it's like, okay. Kyle, there's no way we can wait till Thursday. Going to be itching for this community. True. I understand that. Will Patel continue as a starter or be the guy in the bullpen? I think he's going to. Well, listen, I mean, depending on how Underwood does here, maybe next week, you could see maybe Patel go back in. But the problem is Patel did not look good as a starter. He did not look good at all. Not missing bats, giving up a lot of contact, a lot of hits. So, I think that is the one place in the rotation you could see some flux, because I think Loy's done solid on Saturday. I think he's going to be solid the rest of the way. But you're going to want to see, and McKee, we didn't really get a chance to see him go deep because of the rain delay, but you want to see McKee really start turning into that Friday night guy who can get into the 6th inning, and if McKee can do that, this pitching staff is in a really good spot. And I would like, McKee, really, he's got a great kind of low to mid 90s sinker. That is a nightmare pitch for right-handed hitters. The hardest pitch for me to handle as a left-handed hitter was a left on left sinker. That was like kind of a power sinker, which is kind of what McKee's is. Especially certainly in the college game, 92, 95 with run and sink is going to be effective on a lot of right-handed hitters. So I kind of, I'd be interesting to see how, if you're facing a lineup that has a decent amount of righties, you just like first time through the order, just like hammer that thing in and see what happens and try to get some quick outs early. Because if McKee can get to the 6th inning, the bullpen is set up for the rest of the weekend. But right now, the only glaring thing that sticks out about Georgia Tech is that the starters have not gone deep. And you just need, you don't need them to go, you don't need all of them to go deep every game, but if you can get 1 or 2 guys to go fairly deep on the weekend, you're set up. But anyway, guys, that's going to be it for me tonight. Nancy, thanks for joining the stream late. Glad to see you back in here. But I'll see you guys next week. I will tweet out either tomorrow or Tuesday what the streams are going to look like, so you guys will know. But we got a really exciting week coming up. Some big time matchups. So see you guys later. Have a good rest of your